For 10 o'clock news, this is Alan King.
Has anybody told Independent Radio News that it didn't rain in Lancashire today? I don't give a damn because they're in London. Allan Beswick. I'll leave you to guess which. Good evening, Beswick with you at 3.5 minutes past 10, here till 2, and it still isn't raining, IRN. I am required to anonymously say Audu to Anne and Kathy, who live in the vicinity of Worsley Mains, or if you prefer, Worsley Mesnes in Wigwam. I will not mention who this has come from, because he told me if you do, he'll marmalise me. And I don't want to be marmalised, because it's not a lot of laughs. Not very long, is it? Fancy writing a song and indeed singing a song all about your motor car. I've got an Escort 1.4 L and I know what I mean. It doesn't really sound right, does it? Sounds a bit peculiar. How do to Caroline Hunt? She wants a dedication. She, indeed, is from Thornton Drive, Horton, and she wants a dedication for Glenn and Gwen and Emma and all her mates at Brown Edge, which I think is a school. Well, I hope it's a school now. Les Barker! Bones and booze and sex. Oh, he said sex. Oh, did you hear him? He said sex on the wireless. Oh, he'll be in trouble again.
Amphetamine Fidos at a party Friday night.
Not so bad if you're a dog, I suppose. I wrote this down on yellow paper with my own fair hand. I'm damned if I can read it. Oh, aye. Catherine Holt, whose dad has been barred from Maximilian's. No, that's wrong. This is for Catherine Holt, whose dad has barred her from Maximilian's, and I've got to tell Catherine Holt to stop swinging her bag. I don't know what it means either. In fact, I'm quite doing my best to avoid to find out what it means. Alan, please say a big how do to Paddy and Tatty and Vicky and Andy and Dunk and Mark on Monday. I have them. These are all people that I met on Saturday afternoon when I was at Charo Kitchens, Canal Street in Accrington. How do to everyone that turned up to say hello. This is Roxy music, because it's all Roxy. It's like what they used to play at the cinema, you see, because that was called the Roxy. My dad took me when I was 5. One of my earliest memories is my dad taking me to see The Man from Laramie at the Empire in Warrington. I don't know why I told you that. Please say how do to Robert and Susan Wilkinson, who got married on Saturday. Please read it out on Monday. From Betty and Gareth Westworth of Clare Road in Lancaster. All I can say to that is if they got married on Saturday, they're hardly likely to be listening to the radio right now. But if you are, be gentle with each other. 27 minutes past 10. I can't forget. Manu Dibango Makosa. As near as I can get. Well, I don't know what it's all about. What I do know is it's 29 minutes to 11.
Win £50, £20, £15 each week at the Newmarket and M2 Market, Waterloo Road, Blackpool.
Congratulations to Sue, the librarian, who picked tonight's music. Not congratulations, I hasten to add, for picking the music, but she passed her driving test today, first time. So if you're listening, Sue Mac, well done! Preston 561,000, want to join us on the phone in. Our Rod is taking your calls now. We'll get your number and ring you back. Preston 561,000, the lines are open. You could have put that tape out the way ages ago. You'd be stood there doing nothing. Now I've opened the lines, you're starting to work. What's the matter with you? He's getting worse, you know. He's getting out of hand. Come back, Irene. All is forgiven. Hey, them were the days. Long time ago. Behave. Preston 561,000. Second-hand Rose Rod. Answering the phone. Bye. Yeah, see you, Rod. Good night. Might be a lot of music on the programme tonight. I say music, good grief. Have you heard this? Pepsi and Shirley. I prefer Diet Pepsi myself. Even Diet 7-Up's good.
Ring him if you dare.
Allan Beswick, the late night show.
And the telephone number, of course, is Preston 56 1000 and the lines are open. Preston 56 1000. First call after the Beatles.
24 hours a day, you know that we lead the way. All that you need to hear and say on Red Roads.
Our first caller this evening is Steve. How do?
How do, Alan? How are you doing?
I'm all right.
I'd like to talk to you about nuclear disarmament, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, I'm glad to see that the public have given a resounding no to nuclear disarmament, don't you think?
I don't think they have, no.
Oh, yes, they have. If you take Trident, it only takes up 3% of the defence budget.
Excuse me a second.
Yeah.
What are you using as a measurement of people's view of nuclear disarmament or otherwise, for that matter?
Well, you only have to take the election.
Yes.
A certain party lost on that issue alone.
How do you know that?
It's widespread knowledge, isn't it, really?
Well, it's not spread this far yet. I would say that the Labour Party lost on the basis of all their policies, or, if you like, a composite of most of their policies. Yes, nuclear disarmament was one of them, but so also was a new style, although they didn't explain it, of nationalisation.
So-called social ownership.
Well, I thought you said there was only one issue in the election. You seem to be remarkably aware of another one.
Yes, but the Red Rose image really didn't wash either, did it?
Well, yes, they may well have lost with the Red Rose image also, so that's a third one, which someone contradicts your earlier expressed view.
Yes, but
a moment ago you said they lost on one issue, now you're telling me that the Red Rose image didn't wash, that the social ownership policy didn't wash. You seem to be contradicting yourself. And when you consider how many votes the Tories got in excess of the Labour,
Yep.
and I'm not talking about seats but votes, it wasn't actually that great.
But if we're going non-nuclear, what about all the jobs in the northwest?
Well, Steve, just excuse me a moment.
Yes.
Let us just establish where we are at this moment, because you seem to have decided not to pursue your statement and your argument that the Labour Party lost on one issue and one alone. Are you now withdrawing that?
I'm not withdrawing that.
You still think they only lost on that issue, despite the fact that from your mouth the words have fallen?
No.
The Red Rose didn't wash?
No, Alan, this was the prime issue that sunk them. Nuclear power.
Well, how do you propose to prove that to me?
Well, a person of your intellect must
A person of
surely
my
know that.
intellect knows that people vote for all kinds of reasons, and that they actually vote, when voting in a party basis, for a composite view of that party's manifesto. Not for one issue, although some people do, but the vast majority of people vote for a composite view. And I would say that nuclear disarmament could be in some of those compositions and not in others.
Would you
For
say-
example, I know of individuals who voted Labour who were not in favour of nuclear disarmament. I also know people who voted Conservative who were.
Yeah.
So you can't take that one issue.
Just as a matter of interest, would you say opinion polls actually sway people, or they're a waste of time?
Well, can we stick to the issue in hand?
Nuclear power.
No, we've not mentioned nuclear power yet. We've mentioned nuclear disarmament.
Well,
and
it's tied up in the nuclear issue.
you said you wanted to talk about nuclear disarmament.
Yep.
If you wish to talk about nuclear power, I suggest you ring me back one day later in the week. If you wish to talk about all those other things you've mentioned, I suggest you ring me back on a series of days later in the week. For the time being, I want you to either accept or argue against the fact that the Labour Party did not lose on one issue.
I think they primarily lost on nuclear disarmament. It didn't wash with the public.
Are you going to give me something to support that view, other than ludicrous immature statements such as, Alan, a man with your intellect, thinks?
Well, let's face it, are the Americans
I
really?
said, for the time being, a simple yes or no will do. Are you going to back up your belief?
Yes.
Then let's hear you back up your belief that the Labour Party lost on one issue.
Well, if you let me pursue this, Alan...
You don't need to pursue the argument about nuclear deterrent.
Yeah.
You need to pursue the argument. You need to provide me with evidence to support your point of view. You said the Labour Party lost on one issue.
Yeah.
Substantiate that statement.
All you need to do is to speak to the typical man in the street.
The typical man in the street is not, fortunately, representative. The typical man in the street is nothing. You're the typical man in the street, but so am I. You are now talking to a typical man in the street, and this typical man in this street is telling you you're talking crap. So much for speaking for the typical man in the street. You have now got 10 seconds to convince me, or at least to attempt and begin to convince me, that the Labour Party lost the election on that one issue that you've already quoted.
The Labour Party primarily lost on that issue.
I asked you to prove it. You've just wasted 3 seconds repeating it. Give me some substantive argument.
You only have to look at the party's past history. They've
The
gone
party's
back.
past history, they have actually passed and won elections. So that's not enough. Give me something that convinces you.
Yes,
What has
yes, Alan.
convinced you?
Yes, Alan, but
What
they-
has convinced you?
they were pro-nuclear.
What has convinced you?
They were pro-nuclear
What has
then.
convinced you?
Because they've gone back on the whole policy of the Labour Party that has been developed over a number of years. The party has totally disowned its history.
Do you mean they've done away with nationalisation?
Well, they're not calling it nationalisation.
They've done away with nationalisation in its earlier form. So that's what they lost on, because they did away with that. They didn't support the miners, so they've lost on that. They didn't support the miners, so that's something else they've always done in the past that they've lost on. You see, I can go back in the history of the Labour Party too. You still haven't substantiated your point of view, so I suggest you go away, rehearse, or better still, ring me back on a subject you know something about. How do, May?
Oh, hello, Alan.
Hello, May.
I don't believe in God, he said. His head, of course, was where he lived. The rest of his body was an appendage which had to be fed, clothed, housed, and generally catered for, but he lived in his head, caring more for what he thought than what he did, and more for what he thought than anyone thought of him. He lived by logical deduction. His brain refused the cleric's view that some omnipotent superman controlled the destiny of stars, as well as Earth's small solar circle. I hesitate to tell him that the brain with which he makes his logical deductions grew from a single cell provided by the very God he says does not exist. Would you like to talk to me about your belief or disbelief in God? I'd like to hear it.
I'm not bothered. I get paid for talking, May. If you've got something you want to say, I'll listen.
Well, I think I've said all I wanted to say, Alan.
In
It's
that case,
just
thanks for your call.
don't go.
Well, you've said
Don't
all...
go.
Mate, you've said all you wanted to say.
And yes, I did say that, but then I say a lot of things on the impulse of the moment.
Well, I'm only interested in what you've got to say. Your impulses don't bother me a great deal, May. If you're asking me to explain why I don't believe in God, you've already covered it in your dissertation, your recitation, so
You
we're
said
no
the
further
other
forward.
night. You said the other night you were talking to some Masons or about the Masonic Lodge, and the fact that they believe in the great architect of the universe. Does it matter, Alan, what we or you call whatever it is?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that fully.
Oh, does it matter? Does it matter about a name?
It doesn't matter to me. It seems to matter to the Anglican Church, who produced the report that we were at that time discussing. It doesn't matter to me at all.
No, but I sort of there's something more to you than the things that you actually say, and that's what I'm trying to talk about.
Well, unfortunately, May, you haven't got the time or the
No,
ability,
I know.
because right now it's news time. But thanks for your call. I like to hear people care, but it really doesn't matter to me that much.
The 11 o'clock news, this is Alan King. The former Lord Chancellor, Lord Hailsham, has made a bitter attack on the left-wing Bishop of Durham, Dr. David Jenkins. In an extraordinary outburst, the veteran high Anglican Tory politician accused Dr. Jenkins of pontificating and hypocrisy. Lord Hailsham says it's time the bishop stopped his sermons on politics and concentrated on preaching the gospel.
Bishops ought to remember that they are bishops, and that when they address the laity, particularly the educated laity, they are not medieval pontificators addressing medieval illiterate peasants. The laity are better educated than most of them, and in particular better educated than the Bishop of Durham.
Hollywood dance star Fred Astaire has died in hospital in the arms of his wife Robin. Astaire, star of a hit series of musicals, was 88. His death was caused by pneumonia. His wife, who was 46 younger than him, says he was ready to go.
He got weaker and weaker, and he finally just stopped breathing this morning. He died in my arms. He knew I was with him, and he was happy. He was ready to go.
Home Secretary Douglas Hurd has urged Social Democrats to join the Tory party. Mr Hurd says the Social Democrat break from Labour took moral courage, and he says SDP members should think of joining the Conservatives as they consider the possible merger with the Liberals. An arms dealer has been jailed for 6 years at Bristol Crown Court for selling anti-tank rockets stolen from an army base in Wiltshire to Ulster terrorists. 2 corporals who stole the missiles have both been jailed for 3 years.